Welcome to a new kind of story, one that begins in the quiet halls of a place we all thought was safe. This isn't just about a good dog, it's about the silent truths only a loyal heart can hear. Our story takes us to Cedar Creek Elementary, a school nestled in a town where the biggest news was usually the annual bake sale. The morning bell here rang with a symphony of happy chaos, kids laughing, backpacks bouncing down the tiled hallways, and the faint, comforting smell of freshly waxed floors. Everything felt normal, and at the center of this normalcy was Officer Jake Morgan and his partner Duke. Duke was a Labrador, a gentle giant with a wagging tail and an unshakable love for kids. He wasn't like the typical fierce canine unit you see on TV. His job was to bring comfort, not fear. He was a therapy dog first, a security partner second. The students adored him and he adored them, his tail thumping a steady rhythm of pure joy. But one crisp Tuesday morning, that rhythm faltered. As they walked their routine patrol, Duke's paws crossed the threshold of the school clinic. His usual cheerful demeanor vanished. He didn't bark, he didn't lunge. Instead, a deep, unsettling whimper rose from his chest, and he froze his body rigid. His eyes were fixated on the woman inside, Nurse Eleanor Vance. Eleanor was the soul of the school, known for her cozy cardigans, her peppermint candy bowl, and a comforting smile that could calm any scraped knee or feverish brow. Everyone, including Officer Morgan, laughed it off. "He probably smells the antiseptic," someone joked. "Or maybe Eleanor's got a secret stash of treats he's not getting," another quipped. Officer Morgan tried to pull Duke away. "Easy boy," he whispered, but Duke wouldn't budge. He stayed rooted to the spot, his entire body tense, a low, steady sound escaping his throat. It was the kind of whimper you hear from a dog in a kennel trying to tell you something is terribly wrong. It was a sound that made the hairs on the back of Jake's neck stand up. He'd seen this behavior once before, years ago in a training simulation, but he had never believed he would see it in real life. It wasn't about a smell or a hidden treat. It was about a hidden secret. And Duke, a dog of unwavering instinct, was trying to tear a hole in the air itself to expose it. He gave Duke a subtle tug, but the dog's gaze never left Nurse Vance. When she stepped out, her smile was a little too tight, her voice a little too shaky. "Maybe he doesn't like my new peppermint candies," she said, her laugh hollow. But Jake noticed a tremor in her hand as she held a clipboard, a tremor that spoke not of nerves, but of fear. Later that afternoon, the story spread through the teacher's lounge. "Duke had a moment," they whispered. "Maybe he's still adjusting. Come on, Nurse Eleanor, she's practically a grandmother to these kids." But Jake wasn't convinced. He had a deep, unwavering trust in his partner. He knew that when Duke barked or whimpered, it wasn't for fun. He reviewed the hallway footage from earlier that week. He wasn't sure what he was looking for until he saw a pattern. Several students from the lower grades had been sent to the nurse's office for vague complaints, headaches, stomach aches, or needing a nap. And one girl in particular kept showing up, a quiet 7-year-old named Lily. She loved unicorn stickers and purple shoelaces, but the last 2 times she'd visited the nurse, she hadn't returned to class. No official parent pickup was logged. The next morning, Duke did it again, but this time it was more intense. As they approached the clinic, Duke growled deep in his chest. His fur bristled and he clawed at the tile, refusing to move. He was like a sentry on high alert. Jake waited until Nurse Eleanor stepped out, smiling warmly, holding a fresh apple. "Morning, Officer Morgan. Need a Band-Aid for your big boy here?" she asked playfully. Suddenly, Duke lunged, not to attack, but to block the hallway between Eleanor and the first-grade classrooms. He was a shield. That afternoon, Lily was back in the office, escorted by Nurse Eleanor herself. The little girl looked pale and tired. She didn't speak, didn't make eye contact, and flinched when Eleanor gently touched her shoulder. The image burned into Jake's mind. That night, Jake made a decision. He sent an anonymous tip to the school board requesting an external review of the clinic. The official channels would be slow, but Jake knew he couldn't wait. He decided to turn to the one source who might break the case wide open, the kids themselves. The next day, Jake brought Duke to Lily's classroom under the pretense of a canine safety and animal behavior training. While Duke performed basic commands and let the other children pet his fur, Lily sat in the back, her knees curled up to her chest, her eyes darting nervously to the hallway. When Jake brought Duke closer, the dog did something unexpected. He sat quietly in front of Lily and let out a soft whimper. Not a growl, not a bark, just a quiet, compassionate whimper. Jake knelt down. "Hey, Lily, do you like dogs?" She didn't answer right away. But then she whispered, "This one is special." "Yeah, I think he knows things," Jake said softly. "Would you believe me if I told you he knows when someone is hurting?" Lily blinked. Her lips trembled. She didn't nod or shake her head. Instead, she reached into her pencil pouch and pulled out a crumpled sticky note. It had 2 words scrawled on it in shaky handwriting: "Green Cabinet." This wasn't just a tip, it was a cry for help. And it was all the validation Jake needed. He was no longer just an officer on patrol. He was on a mission led by a Labrador who heard the silence of a frightened child. This quiet whimper was about to expose a chilling secret no one wanted to believe, a secret that began with a trusted nurse and a simple green cabinet. But what was in that cabinet? And what exactly had the children been subjected to? The answers would prove that the truth was far more terrifying than anyone could have imagined. The silence in the school after the final bell was always heavy, but tonight, for Officer Jake Morgan, it felt suffocating. He waited until the last teacher had gone, the last light in the hallway had been switched off. With Duke at his side, he made his way to the school clinic. The note from Lily, crumpled and fragile, felt like a burning weight in his pocket. It was his warrant, his moral imperative. He found the green cabinet in the corner of the room just as the note had promised. It wasn't locked. The moment he laid a hand on it, Duke let out a low, steady growl. This wasn't a warning bark, but a deep, guttural rumble that spoke of an old, deep-seated wrong. This was the same sound he'd made at Nurse Eleanor, and the new nurse, Ms. Carroll. This was the sound of a truth so vile it had no words. Inside, Jake's blood ran cold. The cabinet was filled with rows of labeled medicine bottles, but on one shelf, hidden behind them, were unmarked vials and small syringes. His pulse spiked when he saw a folded notebook, its cover simply labeled Project Nightingale. Inside, handwritten notes detailed trials, dosages, and chillingly the initials of children next to each entry. The case was no longer just about a suspicious nurse. This was methodical, a blueprint. He took photos, his hands shaking. He left the room just as he found it, the evidence a knot of fire in his gut. The next morning, FBI agents led by a sharp and no-nonsense agent Anya Sharma arrived in their black jackets. Jake stood outside the clinic with Duke, who for the first time sat obediently, tail wagging once in a quiet, triumphant thump. The barking had stopped because the threat had been identified. But the story didn't end there. As Agent Sharma flipped through the Project Nightingale notebook, her brow furrowed. Level 13. Different dosages, different days and initials, she murmured. This cabinet didn't just hold illegal sedatives. It held records, patterns, a blueprint. The full horror began to unravel. The unmarked vials contained a cocktail of powerful sedatives and anti-anxiety drugs with memory suppression effects. They were being administered off-record to at least 6 children. But the most disturbing discovery was a section of the notebook titled Observations Parental Absence as Trigger, with notes on students who had single parents or unstable home lives. They hadn't just been experimenting on children, they had been targeting the most vulnerable among them. The shockwaves were palpable. Parents were devastated, teachers were in disbelief. "This has to be a mistake," Principal Williams insisted, pacing like a man on thin ice. "Nurse Vance has been with us for 5 years. Parents love her." "With all due respect, sir," Jake said calmly, "Duke doesn't growl at people unless he senses something dangerous. He hasn't been wrong yet." Nurse Eleanor Vance was escorted from school property for questioning. She didn't resist. She didn't cry. But as she passed Jake and Duke, she looked him straight in the eye. "You've made a mistake," she said, her voice calm and rehearsed. But Jake saw something else in her eyes, not anger, not fear, something colder. It was the same coldness Duke had sensed all along. Meanwhile, Lily was home with her mother. She hadn't spoken much since handing over the sticky note. When Jake and Agent Sharma visited her mother, a single parent juggling 2 jobs admitted she had always thought Lily was just a shy girl. Lily, wrapped in her favorite unicorn blanket, finally spoke. "She said the medicine would help me stay calm so I wouldn't cry in class." "What medicine, baby?" her mother asked, her face turning pale. "I don't remember what happened after." Lily whispered, a single tear sliding down her cheek. The case was cracking open, but it was just the beginning. The FBI found a hidden flash drive with voice memos from Nurse Vance, each one a chillingly methodical update on the children's progress. "Responded well to a 5-dose. More irritable today, will increase to 1 more tomorrow. Mother unaware. Trust level stable." These weren't the actions of one rogue nurse. They were the cold, calculated steps of a larger plan. This wasn't a mistake. This was a system. And as we're about to discover, the person pulling the strings was far more sinister than anyone could have imagined. The arrest of Nurse Eleanor Vance was just the beginning. The FBI raid had been a victory, but a hollow one. Officer Jake Morgan knew in his gut that the battle wasn't over. Duke's low, steady growl at the clinic door had ceased, but it was replaced by a restless pacing, an unblinking watchfulness that told Jake the war wasn't paused, it had just shifted fronts. On Monday morning, a substitute nurse, Ms. Carol Perry, was assigned to the school clinic. She was older, with kind eyes behind reading glasses and a tired, gentle smile. By all accounts, she had a clean background and no red flags. But when Jake and Duke walked their routine patrol, Duke froze again. He didn't bark, didn't lunge. He simply let out a deep, steady growl that vibrated through the floorboards, his gaze fixed on Ms. Perry. "Is that because I smell like my old golden retriever?" She chuckled nervously. "I promise I don't bite." Jake forced a smile, but his heart raced. "He's usually good with strangers," he replied, masking his dread. He knew it wasn't nerves. It was instinct. That afternoon, Principal Williams called Jake into his office. "I'm going to need Duke to stay off campus for a few days." He said, his tone polite but firm. "Some parents are saying he's scaring the kids. We appreciate what he did, but things are calming down now, and honestly, there's no reason for a K-9 unit anymore." Jake wasn't surprised. Cover-ups didn't always come in the form of lies. Sometimes they came as soft silences and polite redirections. "We're just trying to move forward," Williams added. "You're saying there's no threat," Jake replied, his eyes narrowing. "But what if the real problem didn't leave with Nurse Vance?" Williams' eyes tightened, a flicker of something cold passing through them. "Are you accusing someone else?" "I'm listening to my dog," Jake said. "He hasn't been wrong yet." That night, a feeling of deep unease settled over Jake. He revisited the photos of the notebook pages, poring over the cryptic initials and notes. One line stood out: "Confirmed dosage with CP as said, skip Thursday, possible visit from district." He had initially dismissed it as a random note, but now CP could only mean one thing: Carol Perry, the new substitute nurse. But she wasn't hired until after Nurse Vance's arrest, was she? Jake checked the district database. The first twist hit him like a physical blow. Carol Perry wasn't new. She had worked at a sister school, Brook Meadow Intermediate, for 7 years before being quietly transferred last spring. No red flags. But a quick call to an old friend who handled a K-9 unit at Brook Meadow revealed the truth. "Yeah, I remember her," his friend said. "Weird vibe. Loved giving out vitamins to kids. Some parents raised concerns, but it got brushed under the rug." Jake's mind raced. They hadn't taken down a rogue nurse. They had exposed a symptom of a much larger disease. He knew what he had to do. The next day, he and Agent Sharma dug deeper, uncovering a hidden memo from an internal HR investigation at Brook Meadow. It showed multiple staff had reported unusual student drowsiness following visits to Nurse Perry, but no disciplinary action had ever been taken. It was buried. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't a coincidence. It was a pattern. The Project Nightingale wasn't a rogue operation. It was a system, a network of deception with a chilling name: the Horizon Initiative. They found a document from a quiet raid on a storage unit registered to Carol Perry. Inside were boxes of medical supplies, more handwritten notes, and a folder titled Behavioral Response Protocol, Cedar Creek Phase 2. The implications were horrifying. This was a plan, a system to target vulnerable children, quiet them, monitor the results, and report them to someone else. As the sun set, Jake knew they had just begun to peel back the layers. The nurses weren't the masterminds, they were just foot soldiers. The real puppet master, the one pulling the strings, was still out there, hiding in plain sight. And the next betrayal would be the most personal one of all. The quiet raid on Carol Perry's storage unit yielded a trove of evidence, but it wasn't the documents or the vials that sent chills down Agent Sharma's spine. It was a single line in a recovered email, a line so precise and so chilling it broke the case wide open. "Ensure Jake Greer is diverted. He's a liability. The dog especially. Use internal resources, delay discredit if necessary." Jake Morgan's blood ran cold. The email was dated 3 days before Nurse Vance was arrested. Someone inside the department had been watching him before it even began. Someone he had trusted. That night, as Jake sat with Agent Sharma reviewing the documents, a low, unmistakable growl erupted from Duke. His head snapped up, his lips curled slightly, and he stared intently at the front door. A knock echoed through the quiet apartment. Jake motioned for Agent Sharma to stay back. He slowly opened the door. It was Detective Ron Beckett, a man Jake had worked with for 4 years. He held a paper bag with 2 coffees. "Evening," Beckett said casually. "Heard you were pulling all-nighters again. Figured you could use a pick-me-up." Jake didn't move. "You drove across town to bring me coffee. Thought I'd check in too." Beckett added, his eyes glancing over Jake's shoulder. "Saw the raids on the news. Big case. Lot of noise." At that moment, Duke stepped between them, his tail-stiff hackles up. Beckett smirked nervously. "What's with Cujo here? He forgets I gave him jerky last Christmas." Jake narrowed his eyes. Duke only reacted like this to one thing: danger. "You should go, Ron." Beckett's face changed just slightly. The smile fell. "You sure that's how we're playing it, Jake?" Jake tensed his fingers, drifting to his phone. Quietly, he tapped record. "You worked with me for years," Beckett said, stepping forward. "You think I'm part of that circus? I've got 2 kids at Meadow Ridge." "I think you've got a lot more than that," Jake said evenly. "I think you've got answers." Beckett's jaw flexed. "You weren't supposed to dig this far, Greer." He dropped the coffees, pulled a taser, and fired. Jake ducked, and Duke lunged, hitting Beckett's center mass and knocking the taser to the floor. The detective yelled, shoving at the dog, but Duke had locked onto his arm, pinning him. Jake rushed in and cuffed him. "You were the one who cleared Vance's background," he said, his voice laced with betrayal. "You buried the reports at Brook Meadow. You gave them my patrol schedule." Beckett didn't respond. He just stared at Duke, a look of contempt on his face. "He's just a dog," he muttered. Jake leaned down. "No," he said, his voice quiet and firm. "He's the reason you're not walking away." Beckett's arrest broke the case wide open. He wasn't just a dirty cop. He was the internal protector for the Horizon Initiative, keeping law enforcement distracted, blocking reports, and ensuring that whistleblowers never got traction. He'd intercepted parent complaints, threatened teachers, and even deleted 2 hotline tips from a guidance counselor who suspected Nurse Perry months ago. As Agent Sharma told Jake, "None of this could have worked without you." The system was broken, but it had a human face, a face Jake had trusted, a face that had lied. This was the most painful revelation of all. The corruption wasn't just in the shadows of a school, but in the halls of his own precinct. The final battle was won, but the true cost was only just beginning to be counted. 2 weeks later, Cedar Creek Elementary reopened with a new principal, a new nurse, and thanks to public pressure, a state-level trauma team for every affected student. The town, once so quiet and trusting, was now vigilant. The children brought Duke drawings, teachers brought him bacon, and a statue was even proposed in his honor. But Jake refused it. "He doesn't need a monument," he told the school board. "He just needs to keep doing what he was born to do." One afternoon, Jake brought Duke to visit Lily and her mom. Lily had started therapy and was doing better, smiling more and sleeping through the night. As she knelt beside Duke, she handed Jake a page covered in purple crayon scribbles. "I wrote a poem for him," she whispered. Jake read the words, his throat tight with emotion. "He doesn't need words to say what's wrong. He hears our silence like a song. He barks for truth. He growls at lies. He saved my heart with loyal eyes." That week, the Horizon Initiative was officially shut down, its leaders arrested, and its insidious pilot programs in other states exposed. Dr. Lewin, the mysterious head of the operation, was still at large, but his empire had collapsed. The system was broken, the network of silence shattered. That night, Jake sat on the back steps of his home, Duke curled up beside him, his head resting on Jake's lap. The stars began to blink into view. "You saved them," Jake whispered, stroking the dog's soft fur. "They'll never understand just how close they came to being forgotten." Duke thumped his tail once, a soft, contented sound. Jake smiled. "It's weird, isn't it? You don't speak, but somehow you're the one who told the whole story. Sometimes the ones who can't speak are the ones who see the most truth. Truth doesn't always come from the loudest voices, but from those who never give up until justice is done." CTA. This story began with a quiet whimper, a silent warning that no one wanted to believe. But it ended with a promise that if you listen closely, the truth will find its voice. In your own life, are there things that need to be barked at before it's too late? Is there a subtle sign you've been ignoring? A quiet worry? Just like Officer Jake Morgan, we all have to make a choice. Will we trust what we see, or will we trust our instincts? If you're moved by brave animals like Duke who speak when no one else dares to please, consider subscribing to our channel, Heroes for Animals. Your support helps us share true stories of loyalty, courage, and the unbreakable bond between animals and the people they protect. And remember, sometimes the best way to find the truth is to look to the four-legged hero by your side.